Good morning, guys. I've just got this in from my friend in Ukraine. He just sent me a WhatsApp message to an article that's ironically in the UK tabloids, but it's like, you know, I've not seen it and I've been searching for this stuff. I'll just read you the headline from the tabloid. Give up now. Ukraine drops leaflets in Russia with nudes, warning Putin's troops to surrender or die as 14 million choppers down. Right, okay, so leading on from what we was talking about yesterday, this incursion into Russia by the Ukrainians, it looks like they're managing to hold the ground now. What I want to point out to everyone is when you're in, you know, these war zones, once you get past the front line, it becomes very easy to move around because all your defences are, you know, on the front line. Because rather than, you know, having a huge line of layered defences that are not very competent, you just want one front line that's impenetrable. Obviously, it's, you know, the Ukrainians have managed to push through. But the reason I'm talking about this is because of this propaganda that they've sent through. So basically, the Ukrainians have now airdropped a load of leaflets, and I'll put the link I will put the link in the description. And guys, it is from the Sun, so you know, take of it what you want. But you know, I have seen it; it is there, and you know, there's a few other accounts commenting on it, but it's not really gotten much traction. Now, you can laugh if you want, but the significance of this. If the Russians start to surrender in and around that area, and if the Ukrainians can then show that these prisoners are being treated well, and actually, after these guys surrendered, they have a better life than they did before. Because, guys, be under no illusion for all you guys out there who are like, you know, thinking that Russia's cool and it's, you know, and it's a good place to live. It's not a good place to live, guys, all right? The government are really, it's just not good, all right? And what I think you could see, and this is just the kindlings of it, if we start to see mass surrendering in, you know, in these regions in Russia, can you imagine it now, guys, right? If the Ukrainians copy the Russian book, you know, word for word, if the Ukrainians copy the Russian book now, and I'm not saying they're going to do this, I'm saying it's a lie, they could do it. That's why I wanted to get this video out early. Can you imagine if the Ukrainians now isolate one of these small towns or one of these small cities or whatever, they isolate it and they say, right, do you want to be Ukrainian? Do you want to be part of, you know, our bloc? And then they do a sham election, you know, everybody votes, and then that part is just Ukraine now. Can you imagine the fury then from what the Russians would think? Guys, you know, and the Russians can't complain. If that happens, the Russians have no, well, I mean, they're kind of morally bankrupt anyway. But if this happens, the Russians would have absolutely zero moral high ground to say to anyone, to any international council, look, the Ukrainians have they've made an incursion onto our land and they've had a mock election and now we're missing our town or city, it's gone, it's not fair. You know, no international community can say, oh right, yeah, Russia, because you've never done that, have you? So I think, guys, honestly, I think that's what they're pushing for at the moment. Obviously, this is just my speculation, my opinion. I've got no other, you know, no other information on that, only what I'm thinking. I know how these things work. I know that would be a huge propaganda win for the Ukrainians and it would be a huge blow to the Russians. Now, guys, you know, all joking aside, well, we shouldn't really be joking, but all, like, you know, shock and amazement aside, the terrifying part of this is Russian nuclear doctrine, or the Russian nuclear doctrine is basically the set of rules, the set of triggers, if you like, that the Russians have that would, you know, trigger the use of a nuclear weapon. Now, the Russian doctrine is very clear, and it says they will only use nuclear weapons if there's a threat to the motherland or, you know, Russian mainland. Well, what you've seen now here is a clear threat to Russian mainland. Why is it a clear threat? Because you've got Ukrainian troops in that land. Now, There's a technical issue. If they manage to annex it and have a vote, then that is technically no longer Russian mainland. You see where I'm going, guys? It becomes like a war of technicalities. But the reality is, it doesn't matter anymore, I don't think. I think right now, in some back room, Vladimir Putin will 100% be talking about the use of these low-yield, battlefield, tactical, whatever you want to call them, nuclear weapons. Also, right about now, I think they're finishing their... So the Russians are having a nuclear exercise at the moment where they're training their soldiers and their allies on the use of these low-yield tactical nuclear weapons. They've already tested their Kinzhal missile systems. They're using it all the time with conventional weapon systems in Ukraine. So the delivery system for these tactical nuclear weapons, that's already tested. They don't need to do any more testing on that. What I would say is, although this is a huge win for the Ukrainians, and if they can manage to hold on to that ground, and also if they can manage to have a mock... Well, guys, all these elections are sham at the moment. If your election is held in occupied territory, it's a sham, all right? That's just the way it is, all right? You can't hold people at gunpoint and make them have an election. It just doesn't work like that. But that's what the Russians do. So I feel the Ukrainians could be thinking, right, if we can take a small town and give them an election and say, do you want to be part of Ukraine? And if they say yes, that's a huge blow for Putin. But it's also a step closer to the Russian doctrine on nuclear weapons being activated. Because, you know, that's what they've said all along. If there's a threat to them, if there's a threat to the Russian, you know, to the Russian mainland, the Russian motherland, then that's when they will use the low-yield tactical nuclear weapons. Well, is there a threat? Yes, they're soldiers on your ground. There's definitely a threat. Now, that's the situation now. Let me just read you quickly from another article that came out. Where are we? Yesterday, Ukraine invaded Russia. Today, the Ukrainians marched nearly 10 miles. Whatever Kiev aims to achieve, it's taking a huge risk. Several times since Russia widened its war on Ukraine in February 2022. Ukrainian and Allied forces, interesting it's used Ukrainian and Allied forces, have crossed the Russia-Ukraine border for brief, showery raids, incursions if you will. The raids never accomplished very much except to embarrass the Russian leaders, possibly until now. Yesterday, elements of at least 2 Ukrainian army brigades, apparently not pro-Ukrainian Russian fighters, as we initially reported, so I'll put this in the description, exploited a gap in the defences around the villages of Sudyuzha in Kursk Oblast on the Russian side of Ukraine's northern border. So that village there, guys, Sudza, guys, I'm butchering it. But that village there, and I'll put the obviously I'll put the link in the description. If that village can be captured, if that village can have an election, guys, this conflict is going to take a whole new dimension, because then, if what the Ukrainians need to do then is they need to pump a ton of money into that village, you know, and make them feel like they have a better life. Because, guys, okay. Soldiers win battles. It's the country that wins a war. If the country doesn't want to fight that war, they won't fight it. They'll give up. They're not interested. You know, it won't happen. And can you imagine a situation that we have that could be unfolding at the moment, whereby the Ukrainians take a small village, they pump, you know, they have and again, it would be a sham election in the sense that you can't have an election while you're occupied, but that's what the Russians have done. So if the Russians are claiming that their elections in Donetsk, that their elections in Crimea are legitimate, then there's no reason the Russians can't claim that these elections are illegitimate. You see where I'm going, guys, okay? The Russians can't do something and then complain when people do it to them. If this happens though, and then another village nearby say, hey guys, listen, can we have some... Can we be involved as well? Because those guys are getting free this, free that, they're getting this and they're getting that. Okay, yeah, you guys come in, okay? Right, and that's what you see, guys. You could see this could be the seedlings of the end to Russia as we know it. But what we've just said, from what we know, the Russian nuclear doctrine is of a case that if their homeland is under threat, if it's an existential threat to their mainland, to their motherland, then they are authorized in their doctrine to use nuclear weapons. Guys, that's where we are at the moment. Although this article, you know, it is a little bit, you know, it is a little bit humorous, sending nude pictures over the front lines, but the undertones and where that leads is very sinister, because this could lead to potentially the fall of Russia, potentially the use of low-yield nuclear weapons. I think they're going to happen at some point. And guys, we've just got escalation after escalation at the moment. Guys, that is it. Again, I'm going to mag to grid and I'll see you later.